is taking on, trying to bust some myths being perpetrated by big public sector unions about their incomes, and they're sort of complaining they might be underpaid. With me is Peter Coleman, President and CEO, National Citizens Coalition. Hello, Peter.
Good morning, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks very much. Listen, you've got a new website. We'll tell everybody about what that is. But what is the concern? Are you suggesting that these big public sector unions that represent hundreds of thousands of Canadian workers are suggesting that they are somehow not earning enough money, Peter?
Yeah, well, no, I think that they're out of touch. I think in this tough economic environment, they've got job security, they've got wages that are very good. The province and the federal governments are all running big deficits, and the wage costs need to be controlled. But the union leaders seem to be in a utopia world. I think they can get, pay raises, pay increases, bank sick days, bank vacation days, and all kinds of perks that people in the private sector can't get. So we're trying to expose the realities of the contracts. And to be fair, Dave, we're not trying for a race to the bottom as far as wages.
Right.
A good wage is important for people to make, but we're just trying to bring a bit of reality to the public sector union contracts that are, in some cases, way out of line.
Well, we've seen the Public Service Alliance of Canada, for example, getting very personal, talking about the Prime Minister, saying Stephen Harper hates us, trying to get this message across that somehow the big public sector unions are being victimized somehow. You're saying they're not living in the real world.
No, I don't think so, Dave. You look at what Harper and the Conservatives done in Ottawa. I mean, they're just starting to take a small nip at what they've done since they came to power. There's tens of thousands of civil servants more since Prime Minister Harper became Prime Minister. And, they're cutting back a small portion of that. The hue and outcry is quite staggering. But when you're running deficits and your wage costs are so high, you've got to find a way to do it, whether you do it smartly through attrition or some ways. But you've got to build some of these things into these union contracts going forward so you don't keep on making the situation worse and worse for the next generation down the road. And I think they are crying wolf, but it's not fair because most people in the private sector have wage cuts, lost their jobs, no income security. These people, these big public sector union leaders, they think they should have job security for life. That's just not reality today.
We do complain a lot about some of the countries we've seen in Europe that are failing, Greece especially, Italy, Spain. We've seen some of these countries very, very serious difficulty, and that's much to do with what you just described, this sense of entitlement by public sector unions who think they have and should have jobs for life with fat pensions and early retirement.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the case. And no one begrudges a reasonable pension that makes sense to me. But again, the taxpayers are funding all this, and taxpayers are hurting, and we want to make sure as we move towards balanced budgets in a reasonable time frame. And I think that you have to take on some of these sacred cows and say enough's enough. We're not going to go through bargaining anymore. We're going to guarantee 3 or 4% pay increase every year because that's just not the reality, Dave, for the vast majority of people working in this country. They don't. They get those kind of increases because of the economy. They have no ability to get the rich pensions that they have now. And I think the government's got to look at their public sector contracts and change them going forward. You may not be able to change what's here now, Dave, but you sure should be able to change going forward some of these lucrative things. And a contract's a contract. If you signed a deal with a public sector union, you should honor that. But I think you've got to make some changes going forward.
You're right. And we've seen that as a negotiating position of the federal government, of the post office, of Air Canada, some of these big organizations that, okay, we'll leave existing pay rates in place, but going forward for new hires, we're going to change the pension, we're going to change the entry-level pay, but the unions still push back.
Yeah, and that's why I find staggering. I really do believe a contract's a contract, and when you do sign it, you have to live with it. And that's why McKinsey's in so much trouble in Ontario, because he's trying to invalidate contracts that were legitimately signed. But they shouldn't be pushing back on new hires because if people don't want to work in that kind of environment for that kind of pay based on what the terms and conditions of the job offer, they shouldn't work there. But lots of people will take those jobs for sure, Dave.
Peter, I'm going to interrupt right now. just an update on XL Foods. As you know, XL Foods and the E. coli scare across the country has been dominating the headlines and a lot of coverage all over the country. The update from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency today, just now, is that XL Foods, the plant, will be allowed to resume limited operations. We're not sure what that means because they say no meat will leave the plant until the Canadian Food Inspection Agency approves a full reopening. So there's a limited operational resumption. I don't know what that is. Maybe some workers will be allowed to get back in and get things up and running a bit. No meat's going to come out of there, though, until there's a full reopening. So there you go. Just to tie that together, I mean, food inspectors, these meat inspectors, are part of the same Public Service Alliance of Canada. And it's interesting that the union that represents the workers at the plant are attacking the union workers who monitor the plant. Anyway, Peter, it's a weird scenario, but nonetheless, there's the update on XL Foods. So what will it take, do you think, for these big unions, and I mentioned the Post Office, Air Canada, Public Service Alliance, what will it take, Peter, to get them to understand that going forward there is going to be a new set of rules?
Well, that's the purpose of collectivecontempt.com website we set up, is to start putting some of these contracts up on a totally publicly available website so people can see what's really going on. And we're hoping that the average hardworking Canadian can do something as far as, the groundswell, as far as saying this is enough's enough, and talk to their MPs and MLAs and say, we don't want these things going forward. We can't afford them, because I think that something has to change as far as the psyche at the union level. But the union leaders seem to think that we're living in this dream world, that they keep on getting pay increase to pay increase. That's just not reality anymore.
And the website is collectivecontempt.com. Collectivecontempt.com. What's there?
Well, what we're doing there is we're starting to put up loading public sector contracts and to outline some of the things that we think that are unreasonable within these contracts, be it bank sick days or things there all across the country. So we're asking people to have contracts they see that they think are out of line to send us the information. We'll load online. We're also going to load on positive contracts too, Dave, where people have seen positive changes where some unions actually understand their leadership, the tough times running, and making adjustments accordingly that way. So the collective contempt was sort of collective bargaining, the contempt realities that people are living in the private sector. A lot of them have contempt, quite frankly, Dave, for the pensions that these public sector workers have, because they could never in their lifetime get that in the private sector.
Peter, hang on a sec. I want to come right back to you. My guest, Peter Coleman, National Citizens Coalition. The website is collectivecontempt.com. Just trying to get the message out that, in fact, these big unions, these big public sector unions, are living in a dream world. They talk about, and this is something that Peter will elaborate on, but the unions talk about this idea of a living wage. You heard that term thrown out liberally by labor union leaders. Living wage. What is that? What does that even mean? We'll come back right after this.